How did I go from drug addict to 200 plus K a year sales pro? This story is about understanding limiting beliefs and an actual tangible process to change them. I didn't discover this process because I read a book or because someone told me about it. I discovered it from years of my journey and extracting the story and seeing what actually worked. So this is not a story about a guy who always wins. It's about a guy who discovered a process that eliminates limiting beliefs to get results. And we'll talk about this later, but I've just noticed over time, whether it was, in recovery, when I worked in rehab or was going through rehab, when I went to college, when I owned my gym. So I was fitness coaching, but also running a business. And now as I'm in sales professionally, there's something I always see correlated with lack of results, and it has to do with beliefs. And so I want to walk you through a little bit of my story, but also a framework that I find very valuable in understanding and changing limiting beliefs. When I look back at drug addiction, I look at addiction as a thing that I did to deal with what was really going on under the surface. And a lot of that has to do with identity and beliefs. The mechanism of coping was addiction. And so when I started dealing with that stuff, addiction wasn't an issue anymore. So I want to talk through this because underneath any type of change, whether we're talking about professional development, earning more money, better relationships, whatever it is, less life controlling issues, most of the time beliefs are at the core. So who's this video for? I just like to kind of set the standard here. It's not for people who enjoy being a victim. If you just want to be a victim of your circumstance, this stuff's not going to be very valuable to you. If you'd rather just stay the same, it's not going to be very valuable because it's going to be questioning staying the same. Not someone who is not willing to be brutally honest with themselves. Look, if you want to change, if you want to be done with life controlling issues and stuff like that, you got to be very real about where you are and what the truth of that is. And it's also not for someone who doesn't want to do the internal work to move forward in their lives. A lot of external stuff, like the hustle culture, a lot of that is stuff that's easily seen, but the internal work is the thing that takes time, thoughtfulness. You gotta be able to sit with yourself. And if that's something you're not willing to do, then this is not going to be very valuable. So it's not really worth your time to go any further. Now, if this video is for people, if you're someone who's ready to take ownership, like you're ready to say, you know what, I don't want to be where I'm at anymore. I'm not okay with this. That's great. Someone who generally wants long-term change. So if you're always saying, if I just get here, if I just get here, if I just get here, and you keep moving the goalpost, but thinking once you get there, life's going to be cool and there's no more work to do, probably not going to be for you. But if you want long-term change and you want to get on a journey of growth that's long-term, great. Someone who's ready to look in the mirror and address core issues. So when we start talking about changing beliefs, we're going to have to deal with very core stuff, things that we often try to hide. We don't really want to be open about. We got to deal with that stuff. And so if you're not really looking to deal with that, then not good. But if you are, we can actually make some progress. And it's also someone who wants to do the internal work required to move forward. This is for people who actually want to change internally, and they're okay knowing that there might be a little bit of time between the internal change and the external results. If you just want the results so you can feel good about yourself, probably not going to be valuable. So if that's you, let's keep rolling because I want to get into my journey. So I got a little bit of a timeline here. So I like to tell my story. So back in 2004, that's when I was a freshman in high school, started experimenting with drugs, partying. It just was part of the lifestyle. I thought I was just, going out to party. I didn't care about, really school that much. I didn't really get close to people, didn't really get into close relationships. Always had some distance, never really got real close with anybody, even the girls that I dated and stuff like that. And so I kind of started down this road of partying and everything and getting high. I remember the first time I used Oxycontin, which eventually became my drug of choice. And of course, experimented with lots of other things while I was there. The catalyst. So in 2006, I got into a car accident. I was leaving my high school going to work, and as I was going down a hill towards Bojangles, which is a restaurant here in North Carolina, I rear-ended a truck, and in the bed of that truck was a sophomore from our high school. He got ejected out of the bed. He hit his head on the curb, and he died 2 days later. And that really sent me in a downward spiral. Started using cocaine every night, stayed up all night, would sleep all day during class at school, and just no matter how much people asked me, like, hey, Jonathan, like, are you okay? You need some help? I pushed it away. Pastors, family members, all that stuff, people that reached out to me, just was pushing them away. And that was just really a catalyst of like, that was the life I was going down. But here's the weird thing. Like, I didn't look at myself as like an addict or someone with a problem. I just thought this was what life for me was going to be like. And then 2007 to 2009, that was like the worst of my drug addiction. It's when I was a criminal. The guy I used to hang out with, he got charged with attempted murder of his dad, tried to shoot his dad. It's the type of people I hung out with. I was a thief, stole scrap metal, guns, the whole stuff. I got down to about 120 pounds. I'm 5'8.5", so I was a little stick and didn't eat. And I was using like 300 to 500 milligrams of Oxycontin a day, unless I couldn't get enough of it. But if I had that much, that's how much I was doing, which if you know anything about it, that's like, it's a really high dosage and costs a lot of money. And so it was just really bad, really wrecking family relationships and everything. And in 2009, the youth pastor from my church, she suggested I go to this program called Teen Challenge. And basically my dad approached me. He was like, look, man, you're either going to get help or you're going to be homeless. And that was like one of the first instances where I had a belief shift, because he was telling me this and I was like, it's my choice what I want to do. Like, for all this time leading up to it, I was really thinking, hey, I do not, this is just my life. People just have to accept me. But that was the point where I was like, hey, I actually have a choice in this matter. Like, I don't have to live like this. But externally, the pressure was to go. I didn't really want to go. I ended up going. So the first attempt, 2009 to 2010, I went to rehab for an entire year. Now, while I was there, I was non-compliant. Like, we got high while we were there. I was, messing with girls when I came home for passes and stuff like that. And I was just compliant, so I didn't get in trouble. I didn't want to be seen, so I was just trying to get by. And I got out on July 30th of 2010. Now, I spent a whole year there. Day I got out and got home, I relapsed. I went out with an old friend and went and drank, smoked some cigarettes. Now, my drug of choice was Oxycontin. I had turned 21 in rehab, so drinking really wasn't like a bad thing. But internally, I felt emotionally and psychologically the same as when I was in my opiate addiction. Like, I realized I was living that way again. And I would deny where I was the year before. People would ask me where I was, what I was doing, and I really tried to dance around it. I didn't want to talk about it. And so the bottom again, another 6 months of drug addiction, got back on Oxycontin. And I remember January of 2011, I'm sitting in the bedroom at my mom's house, and I look out the window and I was like, God, if I just do whatever it is you called me to do, I know I won't be here anymore. And that was a moment of belief change. What happened was I realized that where I was going was not where I wanted to, and I knew that I didn't have to be like that anymore. And so I reached out to the same program I went through, Teen Challenge, and I was going to go to Teen Challenge of Western New York in Buffalo. I did end up going there in January of 2011. But my mom, my sister, and my godmother were all like, hey, are you sure you want to go back? That place didn't work. Now, my dad, he understood, hey, no, he wants to go back. He believes he needs to go. That's more powerful than the thing. And that's a big principle through all of this, was realizing, I believed I needed to go, right? And so that was like this first big time of me being proactive and be like, I don't want to be like this anymore. And so that's when I know that the true change happened in my life, because I did that. And as I went back, I realized, hey, Jonathan, you probably don't know what you need to do. You probably need to just submit and learn. Base level of compliance, follow the schedule. At Teen Challenge, they have a very rigid schedule. And so I was like, you know what? I just need to follow the schedule, because I believe somewhere in the doing of this thing is a change. So I believed that there was going to be a positive outcome from me just complying. Like, I wasn't trying to read into the purpose of anything or understand why. Dude, I worked at Teen Challenge for a year and a half after this. People complain about the schedule all the time. Like, why do they do this? Why do they do that? And I just knew like that's a waste of energy. What's more important is me just believing that I need to get in line with the process. And then lots of things started to change. Like I just realized, hey, if I don't confess to stuff, my past has more power over me than I want it to. So I started just being straight up like, hey, mom, I did this. Hey, Doris, my godmother, I stole this gun from you. Like I started really being authentic and just being upfront and being real about who I was, my past. And it started having less power over me because I believed if I just was straight up with it, I could leave it in the past. And that's when I started to really start to change my belief on what addiction recovery is, because a lot of people focus on addiction recovery as once an addict, always an addict, but that's a belief that you're walking around and you have the propensity to go back. Well, that's true. You could go back today, but I don't believe in walking around with that label. So I started looking at like, how can I build a new life? So in 2013, I went back to college. And what's funny is this says the second chance. It was actually my third attempt at college. And I went to Oral Roberts University. It's in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I got a 4.0 when I was there. Third attempt at college, my cumulative GPA from the first couple times was like a 1.2 because of all the BNFs, failed classes and stuff. So I got a 4.0. And this is like a real proving grounds for my theory is I had this second chance. I was like, you know what? I believe like I'm just going to get focused. I'm going to really focus on, and when I get into the belief blueprint later, I didn't realize it, but I was practicing these principles while I was there about how I behaved, how I thought about what I was doing, like the purpose of what I was doing, how I looked at it, the context and everything. So I was there for 3 years, and then I started my gym in 2016. Technically, we started building it out in 2015, but in 2016, I started my gym. And for 3 years, for 5 years, ran the gym. And during that time, I was full-time at the gym, and we really just struggled. Like it was very hard. And as I went through it, I just knew deep down, I was like, I really believe that there's part of this process that is missing, but I realized I was going in the right direction. So I was focusing on like building the business, doing the right things, showing up, working a certain way. And so I say that was the proving grounds because it laid a foundation for like some characteristics of like perseverance and persistence, but also it gave me a really good context for when things started to change. So in 2021, end of 2021, we started working with a company that I now work for that does like mentoring, coaching, systems, and marketing for gyms. And basically in 2022, our gym 3x'd in terms of revenue, size, everything. So like we grew more in 1 year than we ever did, I think, in the entirety of time so like we signed more people up in 1 year than we did the total of 5 years. It was wild. And so we started working with this company, and the guy that runs the company, he really is a mentor to me today. I work with that company now, so I interact with him pretty regularly. And it was a level up because he started speaking belief into me. But what I realized was this process, which I'm going to get into, I was missing a couple pieces of it during this time. And I wasn't really thinking about how to expand into this new thing that I was doing. But this year, 2022, crazy. 2023, we doubled from the year before to that year. And so that was crazy. And then I chose to sell my ownership in the gym. So the gym doing the best it ever has. And I decided to sell my ownership out of it. And so my business partner was my college roommate. We've been running it together for a long time. But I decided that I wanted to start pursuing this career of sales, but also learning to communicate what I'm about to communicate to you. Because I've noticed through my life, through these segments, and then also I went through multiple deaths in my family. Like my dad died in 2013, my godfather in 2016, my godmother in 2018, my grandmother in 2018 I can't remember the year, but I went through a lot of stuff in here. So like there's a lot of stuff, like my dad having cancer, terminally ill, going through other relationship breakups. Like I went through a lot of stuff in here. And you know what I'm realizing is at the core is this idea of who we are, our beliefs around that, and then what we can do to live, to expand beyond that, or to stay the same or contract, right? And so part of me exiting the gym was I was like, I'm ready to take this thing up a notch about this belief thing, about where I'm going, like what I'm trying to accomplish. And it's really an expansion of vision. But even when you expand your vision, when you think about where you're going to go, you're going to bump into your beliefs. Those are typically the things that are going to challenge you, right? And so these 3 years, 22, 23, and then I only owned the gym for about a month in 2024, and then I was full-time in sales. And even when I got into sales that year full-time doing the role I do now, I had some struggles and I had to go back through this stuff again. So it's like there's a process to this. And so I've extracted it in a way that like is a teachable framework, but suffice to say, this line is going to keep going. And when we look at our lives, when I draw this framework, you're going to see principles that have been true, and you're going to be able to attach your own names or places or things to it and say, oh yeah, I remember that. That was influential in this thing. That was influential in this thing. And like, so what's crazy is as I look at my theory and my, what I'm going to show you, the belief blueprint and all that, like this stuff is like, it's iterations of the same thing. So coming back to it, that's what really showed me like, hey, there's some truth here. Okay. So before I get into the belief blueprint itself, I want to talk about like kind of the traditional way most people go about change. So most people, like when people think about change, they think about a target and then they want to just grind with extra effort to achieve it. Then they get burned out and they think about new goals. So basically, you know, they're thinking the reason I'm not succeeding is either my goal is the wrong goal or I don't have enough willpower. Like I don't have enough hustle. And so that's the second one, must not have enough hustle. I have to sacrifice my health and mental well-being to get ahead. So like I have to compromise certain aspects of health, and then certain things take a certain amount of time no matter what. So this is where you get into like hitting the targets. The process of change, like being a lifelong person who's approaching change, like we're going to go through evolutions in our life. That's one thing. But like actually, when you start to mess with beliefs, you can start to like really disrupt what typical timelines are. So most people traditionally, certain things take a certain amount of time no matter what. And then also some people can't change. Like, and that's usually an excuse, a smokescreen of like, hey, I just can't change. So here's an alternative approach to change. So you determine where you want to go, but then you evaluate the beliefs and identity, and then you build the appropriate beliefs, and then you walk into the new state of you, and then you repeat this process. So part of this is, you know, deciding what I believe is as important as what I do. So it's not just about what you do. It's about what you believe around that, about that, all of that. Defining and building the appropriate beliefs reduces the need to sacrifice physical and mental health. So when you start to mess with beliefs, it shifts certain things to where like you realize mental and physical health are catalysts to where you want to go. Okay. So they're not impediments. They're not things that get in the way. You don't need to sleep less or do more. Like it's about building the beliefs and then building the momentum. And then you start to realize, oh, like some of this stuff just doesn't fit. It's not who you are anymore. Your beliefs and identity are shifting. So those things no longer fit. It's very interesting. The shortcut to outcomes is addressing the 4 parts of belief building, which we'll go into in a second. And again, this is a long game, so play accordingly. Like this is, when we talk about doing this stuff, some of these things, they'll seem like inconvenient today, but they're actually very valuable and probably the bigger catalyst for long-term change in your life. Okay. So let's get into it. This is what I call the belief blueprint. All right. So let me get me down and get this up. Okay. So this is the belief blueprint. All right. So inside this box, all right, you have your character. So that's like who you are and the rigid structures that make up how you make decisions, have morals, values, stuff like that. Mindset, that's what you think and how you are wired to look at stuff, process stuff. Gifts and skills, those are things that come naturally to you. Capabilities, it's also the things that you've developed through practice and all of that. So that's all in here. Okay, then you've got 4 corners here. You've got exposure, experience, expertise, and expectation. All right. So this is the first picture, right? And then here's the second one. So when you look at this, let me get this a little closer. There we go. All right, so these are all contained in this box, and the box is your current set of beliefs, okay? So your character, your mindset, your skills, they are getting you certain results because they are being boxed in at this current state of belief. So you have expanded to the borders of this box, all right? So whatever you have going on, who you are, what you think, your attitude, your gifts, your skills, what you can get out of those are all boxed in by your belief system right now, okay? And your beliefs are a sum of the truth that you have been exposed to, okay? The experience that you've had in life, the expertise that you subject yourself to, and then the direction of your expectations. So these things all create the four corners of this box. So exposure to truth. So for example, like when I owned my gym, I thought that once I made a certain amount, or if I could just grow at a certain rate, then I would be happy. Well, when I started working with the company I work for now as a client, so like the company I work for now works with gym owners. I was a client of this company before I worked for it. When I started engaging with this company, I started hearing stories and realizing like, oh, dude, there is a truth that I don't understand. My former truth, when I was like, oh, if I can just increase growth a little bit, I was like, that'd be cool. But then I realized like, oh, there was way more potential than I thought. And so we did more in a year than, again, I think we did in our total of 5 years. So that is a crazy thing. And I had to be exposed to that truth to think that that might be possible. All right. So the truth that you expose yourself to is a part of what builds your belief system. So like, here's a great way that some people who don't want to grow will say. They'll say, I'll believe it when I see it. The truth is, no, you won't. But what they're saying is that I have to see something for me to believe that that could be true. And so they're not willing to let testimony or other things like that. So they're like saying, hey, I need to see this happen in order for me to believe it's true in this very specific scenario. What they're saying is that I can't comprehend this truth that you are telling me. And so the truths we are exposed to very much generate the beliefs. So when I was exposed to what was possible with my gym, guess what I believed about the outcomes I could get? It changed, it expanded, because that truth revealed something a lot bigger and different than what my mind and current level of exposure told me was possible, okay? And then the next one is experience. What have you experienced, all right? So like I'm a big fan of live events, of going and meeting people. Like with the company I work with, we do live events. The reason I love live events is because you are exposing yourself to people who are already doing the thing you want, potentially at a higher level, right? And so you go rub shoulders with them and you realize this is a real person and there's a way that they think and believe and act that lines up with the results that they're getting. And so you are experiencing that proximity and you're seeing how real that could be in you because you're rubbing shoulders, right? When you experience that, or you go to, like for me, like when I would go to a gym that was doing things really well, that pure experience, it showed me, oh, these are the things that are important. This is what makes a difference. These things all have an input. It starts to expand your belief, because if we just get stuck and stay in our normal environment, we have our current daily experiences. Rarely are we going to actually touch the things, experience the things that expand our beliefs, right? So what experiences have you had lately that challenge or expand your beliefs? Then you have the expertise that you subject yourself to. So when I first ran my gym, I would listen to podcasts and do all that, but I would just do whatever I thought was best. So I was the expertise that I exposed myself to. Yes, I had these inputs, but I never really engaged with someone. I even worked with a coaching company, but I never really took it seriously, right? It wasn't until we worked with the company that I work with now that we just were like, well, let's just do whatever they say. We subjected ourselves to their expertise and followed through because we placed them in the seat of expert rather than us. So when I say expertise that you subject yourself to, it's who do you put in the driver's seat of your behaviors, right? what do you believe is going to be better, doing what they say or doing what you say? Okay. So if you find good expertise and you start following it and you start getting results, guess what? That expands your beliefs. But even just understanding that they're an expert and that they can get you where you need to go, that will expand your beliefs. Okay. Then you've got your expectation. Okay. What do you expect is going to happen? So this is going to be, I'm a Christian, so I have a biblical frame. Faith is the evidence of the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. So like faith in action is doing something even though you don't see the results of it, knowing the direction that the results are going to go. Okay. That's a direction of expectation. It's a positive growth outcome. It's an expectation. So there's another way I have this drawn, but suffice to say that what you expect often leads to the things that happen. So when my gym wasn't doing well, I wasn't exposed to a whole lot of truth. I was just looking for incremental change. I hadn't really experienced what things could be like. I wasn't really subjecting myself to expertise of value. And so my expectation was like, well, I don't know if this is going to go anywhere. So if you don't think it's going to grow, what's probably going to happen? It's going to contract. Okay. So here's the next one. All right. So notice I said direction of your expectation. This is really important because it can go either way. So like in life, you have life. Okay. So my dad died in 2013 and it was interesting because he suffered through cancer. I kind of watched him kind of really just waste away over a 6-month period of time. And then I remember when he checked into hospice, how miserable he looked, and he died basically 2 weeks later. And, I remember that, and I remember going through the grieving process, and people are like, man, I wish this wouldn't happen. But like, in my opinion, I had already decided that I was going to grieve and be sad that he wasn't there, but I was going to live in the hope that, one day I would see him, but also like I was no longer a drug addict and I was on a good path. And so I was like, hey, my dad saw me before that, like he saw me change before he died. So I was like, that's a positive outcome. So even though he's no longer here, in the time he was, we had good times together when I was in my right state of mind. So I had a positive outlook on the morning of his death. Was it sad he was gone? Yes, but I was really focused on the times that I cherished more than anything else. But this can be like anything. It can be in your business, your relationships, your personal life. The direction of expectation is super important because you get to choose it. Everything that happens, straight up yesterday and today have not been my best days of sales. Had a lot of no-shows today. Had a couple calls that just went weird yesterday. Definitely things I can improve. Definitely things I couldn't control. But what am I expecting today? Like, did I wake up today expecting, well, ho-hum, here's another bad day? Or was I like, hey, I'm expecting positive movement in the right direction? Like, I got to choose that. And so this one becomes extremely important when we move on to the next part. Okay. So here's the next part. And this is the most important drawing of all of this. Okay. So you've got your direction of expectation. And so when you are not, and as a reminder, you've got exposure, right? So when you're not exposing yourself to what could be true, right? You're choosing that what you know is right and you don't need to change. You're not willing to say, hey, I might be wrong. I should probably be a student and expose myself to what could potentially be true, like to broaden what you see truth as. So if you're sitting here and you're like, hey, walled off to exposure to truth, I'm just trying to constrain and contain that. And then if you are not engaging in any experiences or you don't think it's valuable to try to experience what change could be like, put yourself into the shoes as something already having happened, and you're not willing to subject yourself to any expertise of your own, you can have all the positive direction of expectation you want, but this box is not going to grow, okay? That's the difference between just visualizing and like actually success. Like people talk about manifesting. They think it's just believe positive direction of expectation. But if you're not addressing the exposure, the experience, or the expertise pieces, you're not going to see the actual growth. See, like manifesting is actually when you are addressing the beliefs around what you're trying to grow into and you believe in the positive direction of expectation. The box tends to expand, okay? But normally, like I said, most of these, you can have all the positive attitude you want, but like if these things aren't moving, you're not growing. First 5 years of my gym, that box stayed pretty tight. And actually, when we found the company I worked for, I had just told my business partner, I said, hey, we got about 2 years left on our lease. I might not want to be doing this after the end of our lease. What is that direction of expectation? That's an inward thing. And so that's where contraction happens. So this box can actually shrink. Your beliefs can compress your character, your mindset, or your gift skills, okay? Gifts and skills. But then the other is also true that when you start to address the exposure to truth, what might not be true that I believe today that I can expose myself to, how can I experience the truths or what the outcomes could be, or how can I subject myself to expertise that's actually valuable and real for where I'm trying to go? And then you have a positive direction of expectation. Guess what? Now you have a bigger box. And then the work becomes to expand your character, mindset, and gifts and skills into that box, okay? Then guess what? That box is the next box. Now guess what you have? A box. And then you have to address exposure, experience, and expertise with the positive direction of expectation. So it's a continually growing thing. So there's depth. Like my belief is that humans desire to expand. So when we look at growth, hitting goals and all that, I think sometimes people get really stuck on the actual, like the goal thing. Like what is the goal? Like hitting the target and doing whatever you can to get to the target. But I think underneath all of that is humans want to expand. I think we as humans feel better when we know we're growing into something, a better version of ourselves. It's that feeling of growing into it. And so there's the expanding the beliefs and then expanding the character, the mindset, and the skills and the gifts. Then you expand the beliefs. So you grow into the box and then you grow the box and then you grow into the box again. That's expansion, all right? In fact, my therapist gave me this because I just went on an event a couple weeks ago, and man, like my goals now are like I'm working with a coach now. My goals are like 3 times my year goals went 3x because of this event, getting exposed to certain things, the experience, the expertise I now have in my coach. And he called me out. He's like, hey, you're thinking pretty small. And that he was calling me to expand into the person I'm trying to become. So when we look at how did Jonathan, the drug addict, become a 200+ K a year sales pro, that's how. Jonathan's going to expand beyond that, right? And so as I grow into it, like sharing this message, sharing this, coaching people through this process, developing this blueprint so that it can get tactical, like this is the work I'm doing now because I'm expanding myself and I'm expanding into this and I want to help others expand, right? So, if you found this valuable at all, please, like and subscribe, comment if you have any questions. But no matter what you decide to do, if you've watched this far, my hope for you is that you see the threads of places where you've experienced the exposure or the experiences or the expertise and the direction, and you've seen that or you've seen it work against you. Now you actually have a blueprint that you can go look at and you can actually design how to interact with those things. Like we can find truth to expose you to. We can find experiences to engage in. We can find expertise to help. And then we can cultivate that direction of expectation. And then we can take the inputs for what you need for your character, your mindset, and your skills and your gifts. It's a concrete process. There's no woo-woo here. I've always struggled with like, how do I bring value in coaching personal development? Well, I think the number one thing I can do is help things that are commonly described as woo-woo become very concrete. So this is how Jonathan went from drug addict to sales pro with a high income, but this is really how anyone can grow into the version of themselves that they see them becoming. Awesome, guys. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the inside.